Kratos dies 3 times and kills no less than 23 gods. Do you know why? Here's his backstory. Kratos is born in Sparta, the half-divine son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Callisto. And all of that didn't really go down that well with Hera, who is queen of Olympus, who also ordered Kratos to be killed on the day he was born. But Zeus took pity on the child and left him with Callisto among mortals. It's with the Spartans that Kratos starts to develop his fighting skills, alongside a certain Deimos, who turns out to be none other than his own half-brother. The two grow up peacefully, but up on Olympus, Zeus starts to hear prophecies announcing that he will die at the hand of one of his sons, who will have to become a marked warrior. More than a little disturbed, Zeus sends Ares and Athena to hunt down and eliminate the boy who could one day turn against him. But if there's anything we know from Greek mythology, it's that trying to escape your fate will only bring it about. Because of the red birthmark on Deimos' face, Ares assumes that Deimos is the son spoken of in the prophecy and kidnaps the boy. Kratos attempts to protect his half-brother, but in vain. Ares is far too strong and sends him flying, giving Kratos the scar on his right eye that he carries to this day. Kratos copies his Deimos' tattoo onto his own head and swears revenge. Years pass, and Kratos eventually marries Lysandra, with whom he has a daughter named Calliope, but we'll come back to that a bit later. Kratos also becomes captain of the Spartan army, and among his troops is a soldier named Atreus. In the midst of a great battle, young Atreus sacrifices himself to courageously save numerous lives, earning Kratos' respect. Kratos himself buries Atreus with all of the honors of Spartan custom, recognizing that he was the only one to have smiled throughout the entire battle. This is where Kratos gets the name of his own future son. Filled with murderous rage, Kratos carries on with his bloody conquest until he finds himself facing off against Ulrich and his barbarian army. Overwhelmed by his enemy's strength, Kratos is at death's door and makes a pact with the devil, or rather, Ares, god of war. In exchange for victory, Kratos will submit himself to Ares' will. That's how Kratos gets the Blades of Chaos, which are welded deep into the flesh of his arms and serve as a symbol of his eternal servitude. Under the influence of Ares, Kratos begins to string together barbaric acts and massacres, sowing chaos and terror. But during one of these raids, Ares secretly transports Kratos' wife and daughter to a neighboring temple. In spite of warnings from the village oracle, Kratos breaks into the temple and massacres everyone inside in a blind rage, including his own family. Only later does Kratos realize what's happened and is struck by the oracle's curse. The ashes of his family will remain forever on his skin, white as the moon. From then on, Kratos is known as the Ghost of Sparta. When Ares tells Kratos that he organized the massacre of his family at his own hands in order to make him the ultimate warrior, Kratos feels betrayed and somehow just isn't all that keen on continuing to serve the god of war. He breaks off his promise, and since you don't get to be the god of war by being a good sport, Ares orders the Furies to track down the Ghost of Sparta and bring him back under his direction. We'll spare you the details, but basically, Kratos winds up a prisoner of the 3 goddesses of vengeance. He spends the vast majority of his time being tortured by mirages, and Kratos eventually gets a little fed up and murders that little trio because, you know what, goddesses or not, if you're standing in Kratos' way, you're gonna eventually get moved to the side, which turns out to be a running motif in this series, obviously. The bad news is that by killing the Furies, Kratos sets himself up to be haunted by the memories of all the innocent people he's massacred, which includes his own family. Athena, sensing that Kratos could be the key to definitively getting her out-of-control brother in hand, promises Kratos that his visions will stop if he puts himself in the service of the gods. Care to place a bet on what Kratos does? Well, desperate and absolutely incapable of learning from his past mistakes, he decides to trust the gods again. Freshly promoted to the position of champion of the gods, Kratos manages to ward off a Persian invasion and also kills the basilisk. Not that one, this one. Oh yeah, and he also manages to get rid of Persephone, queen of the underworld, and puts the sun god Helios back in his little chariot. A few years later, Athena appears to Kratos just after he's casually knocked off a Hydra and tells him his final mission is to kill Ares. It's a perfect occasion for Kratos to finally seek revenge and purge himself of his old trauma. Two birds, one stone. But although Kratos is pretty tough in a rumble, he's not really at a level that would allow him to kill a god. So Athena sends him off on a hunt for Pandora's box, which is supposed to contain the kind of power he would need. Kratos does manage to track down the box, but then he thinks that since Ares' original plan was to use Kratos to kill a god, this could very well be a trap. Ares was pretty much just waiting for that to trap him. Ares impales Kratos from a safe distance with a magnificent stone lance that goes straight through the map. And to think, my parents told me that doing javelin in high school just wouldn't pay off. Anyway, Kratos dies, and if you think that's the end of it, you are way out of line. Because for one thing, we are not even halfway through this episode, and for another, not even death can stop Kratos. A few massacres in Hades later, Kratos is back on Earth, where he finds Pandora's box, gets Ant-Man powers, and finally takes down Ares. When he meets back up with Athena, she tells him that actually, she can't really get rid of his visions. Sorry, not sorry. Kratos, absolutely at the end of his rope, decides to throw himself off a cliff, thinking that death will finally rid him of his torment. But Athena saves him and tells him that the position of God of War was recently freed up on Olympus, and based on his resume, Kratos is more than qualified for the job. God of War, but still pretty pissed off, Kratos decides to do a little investigating on his family. He finds his mother in Atlantis, and she tells him that his brother Deimos is still alive, prisoner of the god of death, Thanatos. Kratos frees Deimos, Thanatos kills him, Kratos kills Thanatos, and voila, that's all wrapped up pretty neatly. At this point, you've probably figured it out for yourself, but making Kratos possibly the most unstable guy out there, the God of War, is up there on the list of Athena's worst ideas ever. Kratos spreads death and destruction and allies himself with the Spartan army in his conquest of Greece. Seeing that Kratos is out of control and that his army is getting dangerously close to Athens, the gods decide to bring the Colossus of Rhodes to life in an attempt to once more get rid of the God of War, which at this point you really just assume it was their full-time job. When he sees that Kratos can't bring down the Colossus on his own, Zeus gives Kratos the Blade of Olympus, which, in exchange for all of his strength, allows him to annihilate the Colossus. For reasons that at this point are beyond me, Kratos once again puts his trust in a god who doesn't hesitate to betray him and send him right back down to hell. This time around, Kratos is rescued by Gaia, Zeus's nanny, who's held a grudge against the god of gods ever since he enslaved the Titans. So Gaia's goal is to use Kratos to kill a god. Original, right? It's only like the third time that's happened in this series. Anyway, she sends him to kill the Fates in order to go back into the past just before Zeus betrayed her. We'll spare you the massacres of the zombie barbarians, the mythological heroes, and the theft of Icarus's wings, and get to the end of this long opus. Just when Kratos is heading to kill Zeus with the Blade of Olympus, Athena intervenes, sacrifices herself, and reveals to Kratos that he is the son of Zeus. And honestly, sons should probably stop killing their fathers and vice versa, but Kratos just doesn't give a rat's behind. He's out to kill gods. He goes back into the past during the battle between the Titans and the gods, saves the Titans, teleports them back into the present, and that lovely little group goes off to massacre the gods of Olympus. Things are clearly heating up on Olympus. Gods are getting absolutely whooped. Poseidon can't believe his eyes. Helios loses his head. And Hermes gets his legs cut off when all of a sudden, the Titans, who have also learned literally nothing from their past mistakes, decide to pull one over on Kratos, which is, as everybody knows, is a just terrible idea. With murder and massacre, Kratos cleans up Olympus, the killing spreads to the world of men, and Kratos finds himself, in the end, face to face with Zeus. He gets his point across in the way that he knows best, some solid right hooks to the face, leaving the god of gods literally splattered on the ground, and decides to just be done with all of the gods, himself included, and kills himself once more, and this time for good. Except not, because we do find him once again, a little out of it and way farther north. But that's something we'll have to save for a next episode, because the latest God of War is as complicated as its preceding saga, and we're not trying to give you a headache.